Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. A very good morning. Today I'm going to cover on use case diagram and use case specification. Use case diagram is the visual part, whereby the use case specification is the reporting part. Okay, because the use case diagram is so simple that you need to capture some of the steps in greater detail, what are the data involved. So that's why we are using use case specification. Okay, we'll be covering on the diagram, the use case, the actor, relationship within the use case diagram, which is include and extend, and on use case specification. Okay, we use use case diagram to transform and represent the user requirement. Remember the question answering what the system should have. Okay, it is referring to the functionality of the system. Okay, we want to transform that into a diagram, which is in the UML notation form. And after that, we want to describe it more by writing the use case specification, whereby in the use case specification, we can have basic flow, or sometimes called happy flow, alternative flow, the choices, and the exceptional flow, or referring to the error flow. Okay, a use case diagram looks like this, whereby you have an actor, an arrow going in or arrow going out, or some books or tools does not have arrow, is simply a line, and this oval shape here is called a use case. A use case is actually referring to one of the functions of your system. Okay? It's used to show the functionality that the system will provide and to show which user, or in our case, the actor, will communicate with the system in some way to use that functionality. So in here, it's basically showing what are the function and who are the user. Okay. All right. The purpose is again of a use case diagram to document the functionality of the system from the user perspective. Okay. Again, this is a diagram which is used for to capture the business perspective, meaning that it should not be very detailed in terms of the technical aspect. Okay, it's capturing the business perspective, or the user's the view of the users. So when you are doing the use case diagram, when you draw that diagram, you are actually documenting the scope of the system, and you also will document the interaction between the user and the system. Okay? And then this diagram, and together with the specification, can be used for system tests later on. And as you go along developing this or creating this diagram together with the specification and another diagram that comes after that, you can show how all this diagram is actually tracing one to another. Okay, it's actually all these diagrams are actually consistent with one another. Okay, use case is showing a set of sequence of action. Okay, so within a use case, there are actually several steps that you are going to capture, not in the diagram, but in the specification, right? That the system performs to achieve an observable results or a value to an actor. So along the way, in the sequence of action, there is an actor or the user of the system. Right? And normally when you draw this use case, maybe when you first draw it for the first time, you will realize that you will have several versions. Okay, as you go along developing the experience and skills, maybe it's easier for you to draw it. Maybe you can get it for the first time. So you have this oval kind of shape, which will be labeling the name of the use case. Okay, and then we have the actor, the stick people symbol. All right, so this is actually representing the actor. The actor is not limiting only to the human being or the user. It can also be referring to another machine or another system. Right. So there are two types of actors, primary one and a secondary one. Okay, primary actor is the active actor that initiate the activity. So this is the person that start the action and can get some value in return. The secondary actor is a passive actor and does not initiate any activity. Right? So not to worry that much. Maybe we don't really have to think much about this. Alright. Okay, primary actor is the one that trigger, that start the use case, whereby the secondary actor is the one that receive anything out of the use case. For example, there is a use case that generate a report, and that report is seen by the manager, for example. So this is called this is when this happened, this is a secondary actor, the one that receive, not the one that trigger. Okay, so normally when you draw a use case diagram, you'll be having the actor. You can have more than one. And again, the actor can be either human being, machine, or device. And then you can have many of the use cases here, okay, depending on the system that you are building. And then normally you are on the software that you are using. Sometimes you can draw this box here. This is to show the boundary, okay, to scope it down. And then you have the arrow communication association. Sometimes you might have an arrow going in if it's a primary actor, or you can have arrow going out, or this is if this is the secondary actor. Okay, so it looks like that. Normally, the way that you label the use case is that you will often start with a verb and then followed by a noun. For example, register staff, buy product. Okay, you start with a verb first, followed by a noun. And normally it should be short. You don't make a very lengthy name for a use case. Okay, and then you have a communication diagram. Or sometimes you can have a sub. If it's a very complex system, within the rectangle that you draw to represent the boundary, you can have another subsystem inside it. Okay, so you can group it together in case that it's a very complicated use case diagram. Okay. The use case is always initiated by actor, but sometimes it can be initiated by the system. Okay, for example, if that case is related to time, for example, you have to print out payslip every 25th of every month. So in that case, the use case is started by a system, which is set in a very timely manner. The use case provide value to the actor. So normally the value, the actor can get something out of that use case, and the use case must be complete. Okay. So you have to have a very complete process. Okay, how do you find a use case? Okay, normally when you are for example, you can find a use case either out of interviewing your user, or if you are given a document describing the system, you can try to find it. Okay, which function does an actor require for the system? Okay, what does the actor need to do? Right, so that is a kind of question that you can ask yourself when you are trying to find a use case. Then, does the actor need to read, create, destroy, modify, or store some kind of information in the system? So, so as you go along reading the documentation or talking to the actual user during the interview, this you'll be thinking what kind of data that the system is dealing with, what kind of process that you perform on the data. Does the actor need to not be notified about an event in the system? Okay. Could the actor daily work be simplified or automated? right? And what is the output? What is the kind of reporting that the actor currently want, or what kind of input do they want to record or capture? What is the major problem of the current system? So these are kind of questions that you can use in order to find out about the use cases. Right, among the use cases itself, sometimes in the use case, and most of the time in our use case diagram, there are more than one use case. So you can actually show relationship between them. There are basically two types. One is extend, another one is include. This is how you label it. Okay, extend is a relationship in which when you wish to show that a use case provides additional functionality that may be required in another use case, right? You are basically providing an option. It's not compulsory. It is only option. For example, whenever an editor is editing the text, the editor can extend it by doing grammar check. So grammar checking is not compulsory. It's only an option. Or editor is enough just by editing. Or sometimes editor can do spell checking. Okay, so when you have extend relationship, it's actually showing options, and see the arrow is actually not, it's actually heading towards the use case, the main use case, right? Another form of relationship between the use cases is called include. Okay, include is used when you wish to show that a use case provides additional functionality that always required in another use case. Never stands alone. Okay, so an example is easy understanding. Think about login into the system. Login is always compulsory for most of the transaction. So that is an example of include relationship. Okay, for example, if you want to do deposit fund in your ATM machine or in your web online banking system, you normally need to do verification of customer first, right? So see the arrow is actually moving out. It's showing a set of sequence, but a compulsory sequence, meaning that before you do deposit fund, verify customer need to be done first. Okay, whereby in the extend relationship, the relationship between the use cases is only choices or options, not compulsory. But in the include relationship, the relationship among the use cases is a must or compulsory. The easiest way to remember is a login function. For most of our transaction, login is actually compulsory. Okay. Just now we have explained about relationship between several use cases. There is also a relationship between the actors. Remember, I mentioned to you just now, actors can be more than one, can have be more. An actor can also uh, represent not only human being, but also machine or devices or another system. Okay, so one of the relationship that can be represented among actors is called generalization. It's like when you learn object-oriented before, right? There's a generalization where, for example, we have one customer can, and at the same time we have um, there is two type of customers: individual customer and corporate customer. Okay. Each of them have some difference, but they share the same data or attributes, so you can actually group them together into a more generalized actor, which is called customer, right? Like the one that you did in your object-oriented class. Okay, what you have seen so far is how to draw the use case diagram. Okay, the drawing part. Now we take a look on the reporting part, which is called use case specification. Because use case diagram is so simple, there are lots of information left uncaptured. Okay, we do not document it. So the way to document it is to document it in use case specification. So how do you do it? Okay, first of all, you find the system boundary. Okay, what that means is that you identify the main functionality of the system. You identify the main use case. And then you identify the actor. Okay, maybe if there are many actors, you can list it down and then try to identify the goal of the primary actor. So what you need to understand what the actor goals. Okay, and then identify and write the overview of major use cases. So first of all, what you need to do is you write down the processes involved in each of the use case. Normally, you only do this after you have done the requirement gathering process. Remember, we learned that uh, in order to do system analysis, one of the method is to gather the requirement. Right, you do interviews, observation, you can study the documents, or you can actually do survey. Okay, by doing that, you can get lots of information. That information is actually very useful when you are writing the use cases because you need to know what are the process in detail. Okay, so you write down the major use cases for each of the use case, one oval. You write one set of use case specification, and then you read it, you review it carefully and do revision. So normally you have to do this many times in order to get to understand the process well. Okay, how you can do this? You can imagine that you are the user, how the user actually will use the system. You should imagine what form is being opened, what data is being entered, what output will be shown on the screen or in the report. Okay, so that's how you should imagine the level of detailedness when you are writing the use case specification. Okay, after you get the happy flow, the normal flow, you start thinking about um, is there any error that might happen or alternative options that will happen. Okay, and then after you are confirmed with this, then you will start drawing the diagram. Okay, and then you expand major use case. Okay, you start filling in the details. Okay, right now in the normal flow. Okay, sometimes later on when you start writing it, you feel wow, it's a very lengthy document. Okay, when it happens like that, means that the process is so complicated, you need to break it down to several use cases. Okay, and start thinking about the alternative flow. So alternative flow is actually referring to another option. Let's say uh, when you use your ATM machine, right? So in normally when you are trying to do withdrawal of your money, right? Sometimes you already know how much money you have in the balance, right? Sometimes you don't. If you don't, you normally what you do is you go and check the balance first, or you want to check the balance later, right? So let's say you withdraw the money. After you have done that, you want to check the balance. So that is the alternative flow. Or sometimes maybe you go to do the withdrawal without knowing the balance, and then what happens is that you withdraw money that is exceeding the amount. So that is a form of exceptional flow. It's an error. Okay? And then when you do that, you confirm your use case, you redraw it again. Okay? So it's actually an iterative kind of way of drawing. Right? Actually, when you first draw it for the first time, maybe you will be creating a very complicated diagram. It's okay because you are trying to extract all the requirement out of that documentation or from your interviews or from your observation. Okay, you will make it several rounds before you can get a more suitable use case diagrams. Okay, first time drawing you might feel is a very complicated one, but as you go along, maybe you will have better idea on how to draw it. We try to keep it simple. Each use case should focus on communicating one aspect. So one use case, it should actually cover only one main function. Show only those actors that are related to that use case. Maybe if it's a complex system, there are so many users, but for that one particular use case, what are the use case? Who are the actors? Show only those use cases that are important to understand the behavior of the system. Okay? Because you should remember that this use case diagram is used with the user, actual system user who might not have technical background. So you don't want to create a very complicated diagram because it might make them confused. Okay, so when make the name very simple and identifiable. Okay, describe the flow of event clearly. Okay, later on when you write your use case specification, you should describe the steps. It should be written in very careful, clear manner. Found factor common behavior. Okay, things which is can be grouped together, you group it together. Uh, Factor variant behavior, behavior which is different, you try to make it as an extend relationship.